going to cover with you today really center on the foundation of urban extension programs, at least from our view or lens at this point in Oregon, and the campus to community sort of perspective. Also honing in on strategies and develop mutually beneficial partnerships, something that's primary and key to working in urban environments. Looking at a few promising practices and lessons learned, talking about a few emerging opportunities for us at OSU, and also sort of asking the question, what does community engagement and partnerships look like in your urban extension program? So I'll start us off by essentially just sharing a bit about OSU's strategic plan. And so our strategic plan coming out of the university as the land grant in Oregon really centers on being actively engaged in healthy people, healthy planet, and healthy economy. And there's a big which makes up the Extension Service, the Agricultural Experiment Station, as well as the Forest Research Laboratory. Recently, we just went through a strategic plan at the university level, and we're really looking at updating the campus or the university's overall strategic plan, and we've been calling it Strategic Plan 3.0. And what that really focuses on is providing a transformative educational experience for all learners, number one. Also demonstrating leadership as the land grant and research and scholarship and creativity, and really trying to hone in on the signature areas of distinction, some of the pieces I mentioned in terms of healthy planet, economy, and people. And then, of course, strengthening and providing or demonstrating impact and reach throughout Oregon and beyond. So this graphic that you see on the screen here really illustrates the unique interconnectedness between OSU research and extended education campus activities, which of course includes the Extension Service. And this may be somewhat similar to a lot of your programs and universities within the Western region and perhaps across the United States as well. But it's really to bring that research from the university to the communities and to apply that in a practical manner to, in essence, really solve significant problems in the community. So looking at a couple of areas within our Extension Service at least, and again, it may not necessarily be unique just to Oregon, but across the system, we have agriculture and natural resources, forestry and natural resources, we have family, community, and health, 4-H and youth development, and Sea Grant. All of these programs and Extension itself, as I mentioned, fall into the Division of Outreach and Engagement. The Division of Outreach and Engagement is not just limited to the Extension Service. It also includes Extended Campus or eCampus, which is also online learning, PACE or professional and continuing education. We have something in Oregon known as OSU Open Campus, an engagement academy, and a number of other partnerships that sort of come through the university or from the campus themselves from the various colleges. Interesting enough, the 4-H program, 4-H Youth Development, does fall now into the College of Health and Human Sciences, which is kind of more of that core area of family and community health, which incidentally was or became an accredited public health institution in Oregon just this last year, something we're quite proud of. So for the remainder of the presentation, I just want to shift the focus a little bit to more of what the ask of me was when we came to put this presentation together. And that's really just to look at OSU Extension in the Portland metro area. What are we doing? What do we have going on? What are some of the things that are positive? Where do we think there are additional emerging opportunities? And where can you learn from some of the experiences that we've had within the Portland metro area? So the vision is quite challenging in terms of really advancing and moving some of the ideas forward. But it's really for OSU Extension to lead the engagement and outreach mission in the Portland metro region and to meet those rapidly changing and emerging needs for the benefit of urban residents in their communities. And some of the words that I think help sort of describe how we go about fulfilling that vision and working to meet our mission within Extension are really, to look at things such as transformation and to look at counties and to, determine what is distinctive and, how responsive are we to community and, are we engaging in service in the variety of ways that faculty and programs are expected to as a land grant. Is there a balance between rural and urban, particularly when we have many of our metro counties that, yes, are urban, but also too many communities on the cusp that are really communities in transition or just growing into being urban communities, and how do we help them and their audiences and sort of move some of their value systems along. So a lot of different words just to describe what we're doing in the Portland metro area to meet some of the vision and some of the mission. So a bit of the foundation relative to how we've gone about doing our work, and I've been part of the Extension service in the Portland metro area, as I mentioned, for the last 7 years. But it's really just kind of looking at the landscape and trying to figure out what was and what can be and what will become sort of futuristically. And so one of the first things that I was engaged with is really just sort of what I would sort of consider toppling the mush, which is really sort of looking at all of what has taken shape in a Portland metro environment historically and sort of honoring that past, but also looking at the things that we can learn from it and the things that will help us move forward in the future. And that too also includes the relationships we have with county government, with some of the relationships we have with various colleges and departments on campus, with some of the partners that we have and had in the past, but just really overcoming kind of what it was that Extension was doing, prior to my arrival 7 years ago. So that invoked a whole series of conversations and of course many meetings with key stakeholders, both internal and external to the organization, to identify and prioritize issues. And of course with that, you're also working and engaging with learners. Who is your learner audience and how are you working to meet their needs? Certainly in an urban environment, not unlike other places, of course, you're also looking at the diversity, the representative population, and pockets of groups of people that we may not have worked with previously, and how can we work with different folks to kind of bring about creating some change in their communities and meeting some of the needs that they may in fact need or want. And then of course really taking leadership and identifying where leadership is within the ranks of the Extension service and within various faculty and programs, and looking at who can champion efforts, who can think outside the box, who can do different things that will allow us to sort of be transformative and be successful going forward in the future. Transparent communication, I think, in many respects was critical to all of this. Really being transparent, really talking about what it is that was working well, what it is that we had to improve upon, and really just being willing to sort of make some of those changes and adjustments, realizing that change is something that I think we all struggle with when it sort of faces us. But creating a comfort level where people can accept and tolerate change and also be part of the change process, which thereby would sort of hint and indicate success. There was another effort that was made early on in terms of the formation of 2 education councils. Many extension programs have program advisory committees. Sometimes overall extension programs have advisory councils. I chose to go the route of 2 education councils in the metro area, one for Multnomah County and one for Washington County. And really those councils, they became the eyes and ears of kind of the community. Much of the representation within those councils was program specific, with a few members at large and a few business folks or some very creative people. But what we found is we were in essence having the same 2 conversations in 2 separate meetings between the 2 counties. And while there is starking differences between a few of the metro counties, we came to a conclusion that the needs may be best met by sort of collapsing the 2 education councils, in which then became known, or is known right now, as the Regional Extension Citizen Advisory Network. And that is a body that is made up of community members from each of the 2 counties in the metro area to really help inform and help us assess what it is that we should be doing in the Portland metro area relative to programming, relative to various initiatives that we've embarked on here in the Portland area. And finally, I think things are just a continual assessment. We're constantly looking at what to invest in, where we spend our time, and where we spend our time, and how can we figure out how to allocate resources and put forward opportunities for people to help them help themselves and build capacity in the community. So this is sort of just to represent that in a lot of urban environments, of course, diversity in the audiences served are really primary to the core mission. And it's something that I'm quite proud of in the Portland metro area, which incidentally has a population of roughly, depends how you count, of course, but about 1.5 million people. And so we have a large Latino community and a growing Asian community. And yet also too, Portland is quite white or Caucasian. And so, we have to work sort of at the level of the people in the communities. And so I'm proud to have a number of diverse staff that work within the Extension Service that really do have the cultural competence and some of the professional background to really work in the communities that they're actually serving. And so that's something that I think has really carried us and some of the programs that we've been able to deliver through and throughout in the last several years. So our footprint today more or less sort of looks maybe similar to a lot of different places around the Western region and maybe even nationally to some degree. Of course, we have a community urban horticulture program that also involves master gardeners. We have the 4-H youth development program. We have nutrition education, oftentimes funded by SNAP vis-a-vis the Farm Bill. We have programs such as field crops. We're also blessed in Multnomah County to have something known as the Food Innovation Center, which really works hand in glove with small business entrepreneurs to develop or to cultivate a product or an idea or a program to whatever degree and bring that out to market. As well, in Clackamas County, there is Agricultural Research Station. This is the North Willamette Research and Extension Center. And within that center, that is roughly 15 miles from the center of Portland at most, you have researchers and you have extension faculty who are serving in the various content areas as subject matter experts in vegetable crops, berry crops, small farms, nursery, integrated pest management, small fruits, nursery pathology, and also Christmas trees, which is considered an agricultural crop in Oregon. So one of our strategies in terms of working in an urban environment like the Portland Metro is really to engage and empower the community to identify and solve challenges. and looking at community members in partnership with extension faculty who are actively involved in problem solving for community solutions. So in short, it's interesting because there's tensions within a system to sort of suggest, should extension be made up of subject matter experts, or should extension be looked upon as generalist or community development type of personnel. And I think, in our case, I think a natural blend and balance within that can really serve an urban audience tremendously. And I think we found success in that in a number of different ways. So, like many institutions and programs and extension services around the country, we are driven by a logic model framework. And of course, our outcomes are based on scholarship of engagement. It's incorporated into teaching, research, and outreach work. And the outcomes and evaluation methods are shared with and by our partners. And so we engage our partners in that conversation. Formerly, we had an in-house system, if you will, sort of an electronic technological system that was known as SOARS. This was kind of a homemade program, and SOARS is Stories, Outcomes, Accomplishment, Reporting, Successes. We've now moved to digital measures, which I think going forward, futuristically, we've just started to use this. We'll actually be able to capture not only the stories and the success, but really the impacts of what it is that our programs are doing in and around the state, including the metro. And then we've also moved forward with a new evaluation system for faculty relative to something that is known as evals, which is very performance-based, which is goal-orientated and driven. And so I think from that, we hope to really simplify some of our reporting and some of our evaluation and some of the work that's being done, and be able to demonstrate and talk about that in a much more authentic and efficient manner. So one of the characteristics that I think is interesting as well in an urban environment, and particularly has been our experience in the Portland metro area, is we have limited resources. Like anyone, you could always use more, whether it's personnel, whether it's grant money, whether it's some other type of funding that allows you to be able to move and advance innovation and creativity forward. And so, the resources that we have, just as an example, a quick example, Washington County is a general funded county. We are blessed by having strong support in Washington County by county government, which is quite traditional in terms of how Oregon has worked. In Multnomah County, we do not have county-based funding. So the vast majority of the work that we do in Multnomah County really relies on grants, contracts, fee-for-service, and outside monies to really be able to work that. And so, we sort of feel like we're constantly leveraging, and we're looking at, the quality, the delivery, the focus, trying to prioritize and really work strategically. But in essence, it's a challenge relative to always doing more with less, or making a decision to sort of leverage, certain things, whether it's a particular partnership or whether it's a particular idea or activity where we can really bring in, additional resources. And those resources may not necessarily always be, dollars, of course. It may be in kind and what have you. One of the things that I really try to emphasize is the partnership, support, and appreciation in an urban extension model. And I think that really just strengthens and enhances and offers just what I said previously, the leverage opportunity of existing partnerships. And it also helps you identify and create new partnerships. So we do this through a variety of appreciative methods. It may be utilizing a newsletter to highlight a partner that we've worked with, in some long-standing, type relationship, or something that is short-term, but really honing in and trying to build that support and that partnership and appreciation, and meeting people in the middle with that partnership, I think, is really, really important. Some questions that I ask oftentimes when we get into strategies of partnership, if you will. And you know, these questions aren't necessarily you know, something that may come up in an initial conversation, but you certainly work through these things. Are really, you know, do we together have the capacity for success? Like, what is the reason we should partner? Is it just so we can partner, or is it really just to move forward with an agenda that we have commonality in? Another question that I ask oftentimes is, does public good emerge? Is a partnership consistent with organizational agenda? And is there a common agenda that we can work together on? And so some of the strategies that I think have worked quite well for us from a community engagement perspective relative to working in an urban environment within the Extension Service is really creating the space and setting the table. And so that can be a shared, you know, hand-in-glove opportunity depending on, you know, what partnership we're talking about. Really listening and talking and ensuring communication and expectations are clear. Being actively engaged and also expecting that partners are actively engaged. But of course you need some tangible to be actively engaged in, whether it's a project, an initiative, or something different. And then having those reinforcement activities, I think, is really, really, really important. As well, as a learning institution, I think we and partners in many cases have to be up for experimentation. And I think also to a certain degree where we can fail together and learn from that failure, I think is actually something that only strengthens and builds relationships. And I know, you know, sometimes we get into these situations where folks are a little bit worried about that, but at the same time, I think you have to create the space and the mindset to be able to experiment together. Being up for the process and the inclusion of others, I think, is really critical. Maximizing assets of each other, determining what it is that each of you bring to the table and the success of each other, and recognizing the partners for their contributions. So sort of what I mentioned previously in terms of the just the appreciation of partnerships and what have you. Additional pieces I would also mention in terms of partnerships within an urban environment are really active, collaborative, and meaningful relationships. Sort of goes along the lines of what I mentioned. Having the partners in many cases, and this is sort of a variable, of course, but really having them have equal decision-making abilities and for them to be able to stand on their own footing. Recognizing as well that at times you or the partner must be strategic, and there are times, of course, where you may have to go alone. And so, you know, sticking with the partnership to just be together for the sake of partnership oftentimes does not make sense, and yet oftentimes it happens because you know, we're worried about jeopardizing a relationship, or we're worried about, you know, what could become in a next opportunity or whatever the case. I've also found more often than not that having structure is really, really important, and not necessarily to be bureaucratic and to, you know, push agreements and paper as the end-all be-all. Being flexible within those, but having memorandums of understanding and intergovernmental agreements as appropriate are really, really important, and I think it sort of sets the stage for setting the expectations as well. Being in a constant continuous communication flow, I think, is really good as well, and depending on project and activity and the partnership itself, that's going to ebb and flow as appropriate. Holding each other responsible and providing a level of accountability, I think, is key. And frankly, using the word partnership quite judiciously and using it only for fellow travelers or those that are willing to go where you want to go and see the vision and see the scope of what it is you're trying to accomplish. I think what's also interesting relative to the world of universities and whatnot, and also the work that's being done in an urban environment, is oftentimes we all want the brand of the university to be who takes credit. This is of course part of our culture, and I think in a metropolitan urban environment, it is really, really healthy to co-brand and to take credit and to share credit and to provide, kind of that equilibrium through and throughout. And I think through that, there's a whole lot of success that can be invoked. And of course, having the university being actively engaged at the various leadership levels under folks that are doing the work on the ground in communities is also too essential. So my then 4-year-old, Dylan, his name is, drew this picture back in preschool for me. And I labeled it, and I think, it sort of hits on the head, that partnerships are relationships with people. And so oftentimes we think about partnerships really with an agency or with an institution or what have you, but in the end, they're all about the relationships with people, which I think is key to this. So a little bit of promising practices and lessons learned. And I originally, when I did this slide, I actually had it labeled lessons learned. And I think, more so, I think promising practices is probably the way to sort of talk about this a little bit. But learning and discovery are essential to addressing challenges and opportunities. And as I mentioned a bit ago, being a learning institution, we're learning as we go, and we're creating opportunities where we, as we figure things out, can help others, and we can learn from them as well to help us grow. And so I think the discovery element of this is really, really key to figuring out what it is that are our, not only our challenges, but where do those challenges allow us to sort of create opportunities. Urban is very different, too, from traditional county-based programs. I think in a metropolitan environment, in an urban environment, you have less direct service. You have more kind of the consultative type of work. Oftentimes, it results in things that are more initiative-based versus a program. And frankly, this is where we found a tremendous amount of success in our work, is really working more on the initiatives and some of the things that a school district would bring to us or a city would bring to us, and where we can get involved and where we can help them along in the conversation, rather than some of the more traditional programs that have historically been around for the last 100 years with the Extension service. Looking at what the community wants access to in terms of university research. There's a whole lot of research happening. Some of it has a whole lot of applicability to certain areas, sometimes not. And so really being that listening ear to the community and assessing what actually works and being able to filter that to them too, I think is really, really important. Staffing models in the Portland area are in some cases very traditional, but they're also sometimes very different, and I think that's okay. We've yet to really invoke some of the other things that some of you all know out there related to more of the contractual and some of the more in and out type of staffing models, if you will. We're still working within a system at the university level, the statewide extension service, that relies on tenure track faculty, as well as professors of practice, as well as professional faculty, and so on. And all of that creates an interesting dynamic, and all of it too is important to have as pillars within kind of overall strategy. What I'd also like to suggest is it would be nice to have other staffing tools that we can work with relative to meeting some of the more emerging community needs, where we can help find the community, solve with them but also to be able to move in and out more or less in a shorter time frame versus having programs that are long-standing. And so a maturation, a graduation process with some of this, I think. And frankly, I think we've got a lot to learn from a number of other states where we can start really moving some of that idea forward and sleuthing out where funding can come from and where we may be able to do contractual type of opportunities with municipalities as an example, etc. So another opportunity is really to look at the economic, environmental, and social well-being of urban residents in their communities. And I was asked not too many days ago, how do you know what you know about Portland, and where do you get that information? And I think it's really being the eyes and ears on the ground, listening to a variety of stakeholders, external, internal, monitoring programs and what they're doing, and following through with some of the pieces where folks come to you and ask you, really core primary questions relative to, hey, look, how is extension working in economic development? How are they working, with urban residents in a particular neighborhood? Is there something that you can, replicate from, another place that they've heard of, whatever that may be? And so I think, really focusing in on the listening approach is really important as well. And then, of course, along with all of this is increased opportunities to inform public policy and to understand where there are opportunities to be an advocate, to engage in informing public policy, so those that are really, up to their elbows in public policy can make more informed decisions. I think is really important as well. A few additional ones is really to acknowledge that programs in an urban environment are more complex in scope, and also collaboration and partnerships is really important. It's vastly different than being in a smaller rural county where extension may be the only shop in town. We have in the Portland area something like about 75, 80 other youth serving organizations. So you have to ask, the question, what role can 4-H play? What should they be doing? How they should be doing it? In what form and collaboration? In partnership thereof, etc. And so really just kind of knowing the lay of the land and recognizing that not all things are going to be easy in an urban environment. We also focus on multiple areas of expertise to collaborate on projects. This is just bringing in all of the resources, both from the university as well as from the community, that can help us on various projects. Making decisions and by being active and by participating with our partners and stakeholders. And recognizing, as I've mentioned, the partnerships are critical. We would not be successful in a Portland urban environment if we did not have partnerships at all levels, including government, nonprofits, the private sector, other universities that surround the metropolitan area. And then really just, honing in on effective leadership, being strategic, facilitative, participatory, and also inclusive, and playing all those roles and hats at the same time. I would also say that county boundaries and pride are important, but leveraging resources is more important. And so I think one of the ways you can get at kind of overcoming some of that traditional value, if you will, with local decision makers is really demonstrating it through partnerships. Looking at diverse sources of sustainable funds. This, of course, is endowments from foundation money, fee-for-service, contracts, etc. I think is important as well. Programs that are integrated into the community and have become the bricks and mortar. In Multnomah County, we had, and we're moving more to a central office. But at one point, we had up to 5 different satellite offices in the Portland metro area, in which they were considered to be sort of the points of light or the closest to community. And we've now moved in a bit of a different direction, where we can sort of house and incorporate some of those former satellite offices under one roof, which I think will also create a number of creative synergies that otherwise would not necessarily be possible just because of proximity of faculty and programs and the communication and the different things that are required in terms of working interdisciplinary on a number of different things. And then, of course, creating greater visibility for programs and upticks of support with funding and collaboration, I think is key as well. So some real quick emerging opportunities that I want to throw out there a little bit is, of course, not long ago in the last year or two, we've had the opportunity to engage and be part of the Western Center for Metropolitan and Extension and Research, which is, of course, housed up in Seattle, and who is also hosting this webinar. And I think that's just been a really important relationship and partnership that we've cultivated. And I think through that, having a number of different opportunities come from that, whether it's a webinar series like this or whether it invokes into more of a regional focus with a team of experts, honing in or picking up on the talents of individuals, programmatic talents that can lead to regional projects or multi-state projects that have focus is really, really important. And so I look forward to seeing more of that come forward. There's also a group at the national level known as the National Urban Extension Leaders Group. This is a national group that right now is made up of about 23 different states, if I'm not mistaken, around the country. And it's really a larger group of folks from around the United States that work in urban environments, care deeply about serving urban populations. And it's a national conversation that has a tremendous amount of momentum build and focus and what have you that can help us help ourselves in terms of building the coalition and building the conversation and heightening the awareness of urban across the extension system nationwide. So that's also something that's very positive. Looking at the resources from OSU as an institution within the Division of Outreach and Engagement, the larger university, even outside sometimes of the division, figuring out who our learning partners are with other institutions. For instance, in the Portland area, we have Portland State University, which is an urban serving university. And so where can urban serving universities and land grants, where can they tie knots and work together on projects and various collaborations and what have you. We also have something in Oregon known as OSU Open Campus. And so we are just now experimenting with some of these models. The relationship that is created through Open Campus is really in many of the rural areas across the state focused on partnering with community colleges in various places and doing a number of different programming opportunities and providing different activities that maybe a community college wouldn't necessarily be focused on, but through some of the resources of OSU, they can bring things together in partnership. And so right now in Portland, Metro, and Hillsborough, in fact, we have just introduced a Juntos model, which is Latino for Together, and it's working with young people at Hillsborough High School. The important point with that is that it's not just with the youth themselves, as you would sort of note with some of the other youth programming pieces, but more importantly working with the entire family and really creating that sense of community and trust that goes along with that. And so we see that as an open door and a possible positive opportunity for moving forward with Open Campus in the metropolitan area that has not yet been experienced and something that we definitely want to experiment more with in the future. Of course, we're constantly on the track of forming new alliances and partnerships. We're looking at niche markets and initiatives with food systems, citizen involvement. I think one of the hardest things in a metro urban world is really playing the former Hatter role that I think extension services did across the country historically, which is being that convener, and how do you do that in a multitude of various levels in a metro environment? And is there resources that actually honor that role as a convener? Or are you doing that out of the goodness of your heart? Being a catalyst for change, a capacity builder, and an advocate and a champion, I think are all really, really important things, and again, keeping the pulse on urban through and throughout all those opportunities. Civic engagement opportunities, deliberative dialogue, the use of the various cultural tools. I happen to be involved in a rural development project with the Kettering Foundation, and it really is about how you engage citizenry in our democracy at this point through dialogue, through discussion, and introducing cultural engagement tools vis-a-vis some of that work. And through some of those tools, being able to really bring in new and diverse audiences that perhaps Extension has not traditionally worked with. And so that is something that I think is incredibly positive, and something that we hope very shortly we can also bring to some of our urban work here in Oregon and throughout the country as well. So I sort of will end the presentation, and would certainly welcome questions that you may have, or different ideas, or even shares of information from your particular experience working in urban. But one of the questions I think I'm asking myself is, so engagement begins with an answer, community engagement ends with one. And so I think the point of some of that is really listening more than we speak. And I know, just from some of my experiences, that we oftentimes think we have the answers for community, and maybe in many cases we do. But I think also too, really tailoring some of our conversation and some of our focus and some of the work that we do by listening. And maybe in some cases as well, the listening does not result in action, but it really allows for relationships to flourish, for people to get on board with what Extension and what land-grant universities can offer in an urban environment, where in many cases, traditionally speaking, they're not accustomed to necessarily working. And so this is something that we're constantly trying to improve upon, and something that we really want to try to advance from a vision perspective going forward in the future, over and beyond what Extension offers, but something that comes from the overall university in a metropolitan urban environment. So I want to thank you, and I appreciate your time and your interest in the presentation. And my contact is below email. Feel free to reach out if you have questions, or if you want extra information, material, or what have you. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patrick. I think we've got time for maybe one question here. How do you focus which activities to pursue in your urban environment? Or what is your criteria for selecting an issue area or a wicked problem to work on?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think unfortunately sometimes we get caught up in trying to figure that out as to where the resources will come from to sort of address some of those wicked problems, if you will. And a lot of this, I think, we do needs assessments well, and we have some very skilled staff who can sort of retailer and energize their calendars and their activities and whatnot. But it really is kind of the crux, I think, of working in an urban environment, of how you constantly have to keep up with kind of cutting edge and emerging needs. And oftentimes, I've said this in other venues, oftentimes what you thought was a priority one day, it was the almighty important thing that you had to tackle, soon kind of evaporates, and all of a sudden you're in need of working on something else. And so one thing I've realized early on in this is Extension cannot be everything to all people in an urban environment. And so I think really figuring out ways to know what your strengths are, to know where your weaknesses are, to really help people know where your levels of expertise lie, I think is critical. And at the same time, not closing the door on particular ideas, topics, concerns, or things that people want of you, of course. And the way I think we found relative success with kind of the point of the question in the Portland metro area is really working in tandem with whomever it happens to be to help us identify where some of those needs come from. And I think that's something that's really important and a great lesson in itself.
Thanks so much, Patrick. And we want to thank you all for participating in the webinar today and for putting up with our technical issues. We will correct those for next time. This webinar was offered at no charge through the support of contributing members to the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research. At the end of the webinar, we'll launch a brief survey, so please take the time to complete it and help us improve future webinars so we can share the value and impact of this webinar with our contributing members. The Center holds monthly webinars on the last Thursday of the month. However, due to the Thanksgiving holiday, please join us 1 week earlier and on a Wednesday this time, Wednesday, November 18th from noon to 1 p.m. Pacific time to learn about Metropolitan Extension best practices. What is our research base? Registration is open and available from the WCMER website. And for other WCMER opportunities, check out our website and join our mailing list. And register now for Extension as Urban Policy Advisors. December 1st and 2nd in Sacramento, California, offered by popular demand for those who couldn't attend the Seattle workshop earlier this year. It provides extension professionals with practical tools for engaging in the policy arena in metropolitan communities, features extension professionals who are working in policy successfully, offers an opportunity to explore your own real-life policy-related projects, and includes a panel discussion with extension directors from 4 states about the expanding role for extension in policy work. 100% of the attendees surveyed at the Seattle workshop said they were likely to use what they learned in their extension work. The workshop is priced affordably. Please note that the discounted lodging rate expires on November 6th, so don't delay. We hope you'll join us. The policy workshop is immediately followed by the National Urban Extension Leaders Meeting that Patrick spoke about, which provides networking opportunities for any faculty and staff working in metropolitan communities across the country. For more information and to register for events, the URL is on this slide, or you can find a link on the WCMER website, which is metroextension.wsu.edu. That concludes our webinar for October 2015. Thank you to Patrick Proden and to all of you for joining us today. From the Western Center for Metropolitan Extension and Research, have a wonderful afternoon.